Protective Insight Podcast. Putting the U in human. Hey, welcome back to another episode, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for stopping by to another episode of the Protective Insight Podcast. We have gone past the gargantuan success of our mid-season finale to start to look at how we're going to move things forward now in terms of the kinds of information that we're looking to try and bring to you. And we thought that now would be a prudent moment, nigh an important moment, to start talking about these skills, these techniques, these whatever you want to call them, these attributes, these ways of thinking, these ways of looking at the world, these ways of looking at your job role, these ways of looking at yourselves and those around you, and how that transfers out more in terms of, well, I can just use this for my security role, or I can just use this for my role as a father. Wherever it is, wherever you go, these are the ultimate, personal opinion, I grant you, but these are the ultimate in transferable people skills, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, that's the key thing is, we're learning skills, but are we taking time to apply them or really get in tune with them, right? I mean, I've come across a lot of people that get to go to a lot of different trainings and experience trainings, but then when you ask them, okay, well, how did it go? And it's kind of like the primacy recency effect is like flashing in big spotlights because they remember like the first day of training, the
Yeah,
last day, but they don't remember anything else. And then because they haven't applied any of those skills since they left that training, it leaves them with a kind of like, I felt good when I left, but I'm not so sure what I learned
yeah,
kind of feeling. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And it's like, and then trying to like just grab them and shake some folks and go, hey, you know, these skills and stuff you learn, like you said, yeah, you learn them for your particular industry or maybe to you get some professional development. But the stuff we're talking about is stuff that you can apply to any role that you're in. Mom, dad, sister, brother, CEO, business owner, security guard, gas attendant, and it's really any industry, service-based industries even more so, providing a service because understanding
Right.
communication and all these different things, right, just makes you a better service provider. And if you're a service provider, well, if you're better at providing services, you get more business, right? So who doesn't want to learn how to keep these skills intact in order to generate more business, right? Better their livelihood and, change their status a little bit when it comes to more freedom to take care of your family if your business is doing well.
100%, 100%, and it's something that I took as an idea from something that Christian mentioned a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at the hard and soft skills. He's like, "What's the soft skills of an accountant?" Math, and it popped into my head in terms of. I mean, metaphors often really work for me personally to help me make sense of things quite quickly. And so you could think of the vast swath of information that exists out there in terms of a ridiculous maths problem. Like if I said to you, what is 354 times 963? Now, there is a chance that you could pluck out a number that is close and it be spot on. There is that chance out there that exists. And yet, if you learn the rules of long form multiplication, show your working out as you do it, go through all of these specific steps, you can do it fast, you can do it sharp, but you can also do it accurately. And that's one of the things that kind of gets lost amongst the translation, that we seem to be rather looking for this all-encompassing single serving method, or 5 steps that does this, 10 steps that does that, and it's going to completely solve all of the problems for this particular aspect of my life. When the reality is, as we know from looking at people like Bruce Lee, when he saw the art of combat, it was like, well, there are good bits over here, there are great bits over here, there's applicable bits over here, and he brought them all together under that strong umbrella training methodology of application. It's pointless learning all of this stuff unless you can apply it. And that is 100% the point about the changeability, the being like water. If you can't use, sorry, if you can only use this at work and not at home, it doesn't really serve you. And with these methods, with these techniques, applications, whatever, they would serve you at home, they would serve you at work, serve you traveling, serve you in a service position, serve others better in a service position, because you have access to that information that either people don't want, or people don't acknowledge, or people can't get access to because they're not prepared to take it all in. It's a heavy cognitive load to bear.
Yeah, I have to. I even got to back up to where you're talking about math because like that triggers so much here on my end because just in this day and age, right, the world of instant gratification and and people having calculators and things to this day. I mean, people don't know how to do long math or show their work. I mean, I've gone to the store plenty of times when the cash register has gone down and you have given someone cash and you give them a little over the amount and some change because I want a $5 bill back or a $10 bill back. And it blows their mind. They're like, why did you give me 11.05 or 11, and 22 cents? And it's, well, that's because I want a $10 bill
Take a
back.
minute.
And they're like, and they give you the dollar and the change back. They're like, I can't do that. And I'm like, I'm actually making your life easier, but they think I'm making it harder. And if they don't have that machine telling them what it is and they plug the numbers in, oh my goodness, it's like you blew their mind. And that translates and everything we are today is people are so used to Googling and looking up things and getting what they think are these short term solutions, but they're
Mm.
missing context. They're missing the relevant points. They're missing key fundamental components. And that's what we're trying I think, I'm trying to convey it. We'll find out who later if we're doing it well or not, is there are some good fundamental key aspects out here. One of them is understanding yourself, you know doing that work. What are your emotional triggers? What are your biases? How do you work? How do you perform? Putting all these things together, and okay, now that we understand this, how are we communicating? What are we projecting when we communicate? What's our tone? Are we listening to ourselves? What's our word choice? Are we escalating a situation, or are we actually de-escalating? We think we're minding and we're de-escalating, but what's our posture look like? How did that tone come? And it's just so many things that people think they're aware, but they're not. They're totally unaware themselves of how when they walk into a room and the first words out of their mouth and just how they're standing, the tonality, speech, word choice, how they can just influence a negative response relatively quickly. And understanding these things, whether it's written form, spoken form, they're all perishable skills, just like your hard skills training. And I love the fact too, because I think it was Christian as well. We were speaking with him, and we were like, we get into these great conversations with some great minds around that have been things. Is you know, soft skills are hard, and then it's who designated them hard skills and soft skills anyway? Because the hard skills, okay, they might be physically demanding. You might have a little bit of more cognitive load depending on what you're doing, shooting or driving. But those are all skills that, with the right attitude, I can teach anybody a skill set. But when it comes to the soft skills side of things, because it's not as glamorous or a popularity aspect of it, it's something that we do every day. So why is it so hard to comprehend? Why is it so hard to apply? Why is it so hard to see the necessity of it? I mean, are we taking it for granted? Is that another level of our own complacency? Well, I talk every day, so why do I need to learn how to talk? Why do I need to understand the science behind that? Um, and then you get so many because it's not typically a science or anything for body language. So you get so many people that just want to come out and put their 2 cents, which is great. I don't take anything away from the experiential learning, and I work with a lot of great FBI guys through negotiations and everything else. But every retired FBI guy They've all worked in one way or another with the behavioral analysis unit, and they all have a book on behaviors. And each one of them is slightly different, and they all got nuances. But when you actually look at the book, it looks great on the surface.
Mm.
However, you might get maybe 10 decent nuggets of information, and the rest is fluff. While I was in the bureau, I worked this person and I did this person. And all it is just a fluffed up version of, hey, look at me pound my chest and look at my ego. This is how great I was doing this job handling terrorists, understanding behavioral analysis. But when the actual science really behind it, there really is nothing there in the book.
Yeah.
It's fluff.
Mm.
And there's other books you come across that people are like, these are great books. For one, for lack of the ellipsis manuals when it comes out. And I read through that, and then I just flipped to the reference pages. The reference pages aren't even filled out properly. They're missing references, they're missing key points. So they're not even referred properly. And it doesn't even make any bit of sense. Like, that's an assumption that someone took a bunch of stuff together and tried to accumulate a bunch of different people's work. They didn't really get full credit for it. And it's just a jumbled mess of what someone thinks is a psychological operator's manual, but it's really junk science. you
Mm.
know if you actually start dissecting it and taking it apart. And then there's other good books out there that just don't get that claim to fame that they should, because it gives you different stuff. And I like to look at it just like you were talking about here, Ben, is people want that all encompassing thing, right? They want that,
Mm.
hey, I want to be able to sit this and watch this instant gratification, and now I'm a wizard when it comes to understanding humans. And as simple as people want to think it, humans are complex. The only thing that's predictable is really, I tell people professionals are predictable.
Oh yeah. Oh
Professionals
yeah.
are right because they've got set routines, schedules, and everyone else. You got some things there, but it's hit or miss. Professionals are predictable. That crackhead on the side of the street, not as much, because he can just have something very erratic, in between his fixes. I know you're not going to be able to pinpoint a set timeline and go, okay, these are these behaviors all the time for said person.
Yeah.
And we need to get out of the habit of that. And just from like working with you and Bob and different guys, like I said, like I've pulled things over the years. I know when I teach about leadership, there's elements of stoicism,
Mm.
understanding of empathy. You know,
Mm.
you have Carl Jung is in there,
Mm.
understanding the shadow and the
Mm.
archetypes. And it's just pulling from all these great things of psychology and sociology. And it's we teach people, carry your toolbox, know your
Mm.
tools, but take the tools that are necessary that you're going to benefit from, and you should have some key set of tools that you can use. Not every solution requires a hammer. You should have various types of screwdrivers, so we don't want us to have all these bulky things. So we should be able to get better nuance in the tools we need in order to what we're doing. And with this side of it, the soft skill side of it, for the term, so that's an industry term, uh, which I think in time you'll, if you keep listening to us, we're gonna change that.
Oh yeah.
we're gonna move that and bring that out here because
Well,
people
we're
just
going to try
need to,
to anyway.
yeah. We're gonna do it. If it catches, it catches. If not, it just because there really isn't anything soft about it. Soft skills are hard skills. Um, just because we aren't paying attention to it, we just let it go and we think, oh, like I was saying, we do this every day. How does it different? Well, okay, there's a big difference. Where's your focus at? Where's your mindset, at with it? Do you have an outcome? I mean,
Mm.
honestly, what's the point of a conversation if we don't have an outcome, right? Because then we're just sputtering off and just
Just waiting for your turn to speak.
right. But how do we get better at, because you got busy people, right? Busy
Yeah.
executive people that got things to do, and someone comes in. Well, then how do you then convey that point? Sometimes you have that 5 second pitch, and you got a 15-second pitch, and
Yeah.
that they teach people elevator pitches.
The elevator
There's a
pitch. Yeah.
reason they teach those types of level of communication, right? And you need to be able to get your point across, solve the
Mm.
problem with this we have in a very, very short amount of time.
Mm.
Well, how do you convey that if you're not paying any attention to it? And is that just good in the sales room, or is that also good when you're maybe dealing with an individual? If you're working on the executive protection side, and I'm looking to make sure I got a reservation for a client, and I don't need to divulge any of their information.
Mm.
Is there certain ways I need to present things to get that yes and get that room in the corner and get things there and access from an alley? And I can do all these just by the way that we can communicate and be effective, make that person feel great on the other side and get our
Mm,
outcome and our problem solved, and everybody wins.
mm,
As
mm.
opposed to people coming in that don't know how to do it and just are name dropping and ruining it, and then potentially can lead to an embarrassment of your client, or a
Oh
bunch of
God,
people showing up, and just creates chaos, right? So
untold factors, untold, mate. And like it reminds me of something I was actually talking about earlier. So I'm gonna bring it up again because it's kind of relevant. In that you mentioned a couple of times, it's just as important to have that kind of self-reflection over how you would be able to use these skills. What do I need to learn about conversing? I have conversations all the time. This type of positional bias, you need to learn about your biases. I haven't got any. That's a bias. Right?
yes,
And so
yeah,
there was this it's a British sitcom. It's called Only Fools and Horses. You might have heard of it, you might not have. But just for those that haven't, it was made. I think it was in the late '70s, early '80s. Really funny, and there was a character in it called Trigger, and he was like a caretaker, janitor kind of guy, and he had his broom that he'd carry around with him. And in one particular episode, he was like, "I've had this same broom for 20 odd years." I mean, I've had to change the handle 14 times and the head 23 times, but it's still the same broom. And it kind of conformed on the surface to the same old, well, Trigger's an idiot. That's what his character's been up until this stage, the kind of comic relief
mhm,
fool in that particular way.
yeah,
And yet, what he's hit upon there is something, and I fact checked this in between. I wasn't sure of the name in the earlier time when I talked about it. It's known as the Ship of Theseus, the Ship of
hmm,
Theseus, which is from identity politics relating to kind of Greek philosophy. It's from a place called the Plutarch, and it's for this ship in that if a part of it falls off, they replace this piece of wood, and this part falls off, they replace this piece of wood. At what point does it stop becoming the Ship of Theseus and starts becoming something else? We are the sum of its parts. This kind of philosophy about thinking. So, is Trigger really an idiot? Or is he just working on a plane that nobody else has access to? Which might sound on the surface like a ridiculous analogy, but that's based on a position that you have in terms of objectively reading the kind of information he's communicating to you, unless you know about this kind of philosophical approach towards who we are as human beings. Trigger will remain the comic relief. As soon as you know that, you're like, okay, he's got this connection to insight. And I wrote an article. We're actually going to look at a couple of our articles today. By no means to crowbar in their exposure to you, but they're very important in terms of what we're talking about. And let me bring it up here so you guys can see it in its glorious technicolor detail. So this is here. It's from the omniscient-insights.com website. By all means, go over and sign up. You'll be noted. You'll be noted about this. And the short version of it is, I would encourage you to read the article. Link will be below in the description. The short version of it is, I looked at something called super forecasting, which is a critical thinking practice, but they mentioned the nature of a style of art called pointillism, whereby the pictures themselves are made up of points, of dots on paper, which led me to find pencilism, where similar things, they're just are pictures made out of different coloured pencils. And you pull back, and it's only when you can really it's only when you can really see all of the dots or all of the pencils together that this picture is formed. And you look at something like this, and you might see, the outlines of a face, what might be an animal, what might be a human, and there are 60 dots on the page. And you might look at that and think, well, I only need to connect 60 dots. I don't need to worry about anything else. Right? When those dots themselves do nothing to give you the context, right? That might be a ball, it might be the sun, right? That might be a side profile of a human on the side. It might be a vicious animal in between that's bitten off his face off. In order to do this, you need to be adding more and more and more and more dots to really build out the detail that is working within that particular picture. So analogous to what we're saying here, in terms of the proper use of if we use the umbrella term, a security based skill like situational awareness, then yes, you should be looking at all of the ways that this is applicable to your role as a security guard. But you should also be looking at all of the ways that this is applicable to you as husband, mother, father, brother, sister, as somebody crossing the street, as somebody driving a car, as a patron in a restaurant, as somebody watching a football game, and the list goes on. Because then it stops being something that you use at work, and it takes it into something that it actually is. This situational awareness, yes, it might be a buzzword that's thrown around, but it is truly one of these utilitarian processes that you can use to level up the protection of yourself and those around you, everyone else around you, your loved ones, your principals, those on your team, anybody else in that area. Your awareness needs to be on point, and understanding that if you can add more information to that which you are aware of, then the end game of the information you get out of it by default has to be more accurate because it has its basis in more.
Yes. There was
Yeah,
a great quote that I came across a while back, and is regarding how the brain works in that aspect, right? And it simply is put, as complex as the brain is, neurons that fire together become wired together. All right,
yeah,
and it does, and to me that's like the key takeaway here when it comes to, just for the sake of keeping on topic with situational awareness.
yeah.
You may have gotten into it because of your role. Maybe it's because you joined the military. Maybe it's because you became a law enforcement officer or somewhere in a security related field where that became the bread and butter of your professional work in order to keep yourself and others safe. However, as we both know, Ben, the more that we can experience, we can read theories, we can read how to books all day long, but it isn't until we start applying the skill and then getting that experience with this skill, whether it's situational awareness or conversations, that we start now connecting those neurons to where now when we go to another environment, another event that occurs, our brain is automatically going to that part. It's going to that
Mm,
sector of neurons, and it's going to pull
mm,
here. And each time we add to that, it's just going to add more and more. That gives us better ability to make better decisions, quicker decisions, sound decisions. So if we can do that not just from our role as a protector professionally, but as our role as a protector in our family personally, and we just start getting these experiences. Hey, we might go to this particular restaurant with our families, but then the very next week we could be taking a client there professionally. Well, we already have there because we have already in our brain now a process. We know where exits are. We know what it sounds like. We know certain things. We have kind of have an idea of what normal looks like in that environment already, because our brain's going to pull that group of neurons. So when we come in and work in a client, all of a sudden it's going to trigger just like, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't going on. Something smells different. Something sounds different. We can then readily now start to identify these things quicker, make better decisions, and that's what it comes down to, is being able to better. Mitigate those risks. There's just so many nuances to it that people don't get in, and I hate that it's a buzzword. I guess
yeah.
I'm trying, because there is some stuff that really needs to be talked about, because it is part of it actually falls into part of what our survival
Mm,
mechanisms are. It's part of our survival thing, how we're wired, and everyone is wired differently. You
mm,
need to understand, by experiencing certain things and certain stressful events, you see how you're going to respond. And you know what? You might not like that response. So you know what the good thing is you can always rewire, which
yeah.
is why you want to get those repetitions in, right? The good reps, the good training. It might take you a little bit to uncross. You might have like that tangled ball of string per se, but the minute you unravel it, and then right, you can you can then untangle it, and then you can get it back together. That's something that works and is better. I think I was reading something a while back. They were talking about, it was like there was a study, I think it was, and people always have this saying, "You never forget how to ride a bike." Right?
Yeah.
It's like once you ride a bike, you get back on it. Well, part of the study was is they took like an adult, put him on a bike, but when they turned the handlebars, the wheel went the opposite way. Right?
Amazing.
So when they were doing all that, the brain automatically was thinking, if I turn left, goes left, right goes right. And the same thing when there's something with you, if you put your hands together and cross or lock when you try to move your left hand, the brain, there's a
Mm.
process because it you can
Yeah.
actually clutch your wires up in the brain. And it took an adult with his bike being reconfigured differently with it, turning left, turning right, and things there. It took an adult almost 6 months to ride that
Wow.
bike. But when they took
Wow.
a 6 year old that would ride the bike, it only took them 2 days.
Wow.
So the way I look at that is, well, you look at it from an adult perspective, all the experience and how much wire we've got in there put together. We had to unwire and rewire to this new concept where you have a 6 year old that hasn't really had that experience yet, right? So that's where I think it's easier to, and this is just my brain putting in there with, easier for a 6 year old to unwire and wire the new skill because there
Mm.
isn't a lot there yet that's been built upon at that young age as opposed to an adult, which is why when we take people to the range, I always like teaching new shooters. No
Yeah.
bad habits is the way we say it, right? Because bad habits, right, are hard
Yeah.
to break. And,
Yeah,
and
right.
that's why, because if we have a bad habit and it fires and the bad habit connects, and now we've wired them together, and then we take another bad habit and we wire them together, and another one we wired them together and wired them together. To eventually now to break this bad habit, we've got to disconnect this wire, disconnect this wire, this wire, and then we got to now attach the right wires to, and that's the whole process. And in that time, that's where people's positive attitude can go to a crappy attitude. Um, and
That's
you've
putting it
touched on it
nicely.
in your own about way. When you mentioned trigger, it triggered for me.
Yeah.
I've had to sit for 20 years. Brings me to, that's what you have a lot of issues today in management. This is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
This is what here.
Oh
And I
gosh.
saw a post today, and it kind of made me chuckle because this person felt like they were. I guess in a way, having a little bit of bravado, being proud of
Right.
themselves, ego. And they put this little blurb out there, like some song lyric, and it was, I'm going to try not to butcher it, but the gist of it was things around me always changing, you know, walls to wall, this and that. But the one thing that stayed the same is me. And it was a bash on like training, and people wanted to go out and people trying to do this and trying to do that, but they've always remained the same. And I'm like, that's kind of a contradictory thing to say
Yeah.
because if society is evolving, technology is evolving, and so many things are elevating ahead and faster than we can really catch up, right? This minute we get the new iPhone today, it's
Oh god.
outdated tomorrow, with new
Yeah.
tech. So to be proud of being the same person, it's good if you're the same person. I think internally, being a good person. But if we're looking at it from the instructor training perspective, which they were, and speaking of their training, well, if your training has been the same for the last 20 years, and you haven't molded and you haven't adapted and you haven't looked at it because cars have changed, right? We had this great conversation with Pablo, right?
Yeah.
Cars don't have them nice little emergency brake handles anymore. They're push buttons and different things, right? And the tech in the cars, like you can't even drive the car the same anymore.
Oh god.
It's got so many sensors, so many cameras. We just can't just get in and
Just
and get in
go.
that manual transmission and go and have a good time. So if you're toting that, I'm like, that is a terrible thing to present because we should be evolving, we should be changing. That's part of where I look at things is I'm a constant learner. I always
Mm.
want to evolve, and if I can learn something different from somebody or something I could put in there, or if
Oh
I
yeah.
go teach with different instructors, just having the great things with you. You word things sometimes particularly different when we talk about the same subject. I'm like,
Mm.
man, okay, I like the way the Ben, put that. It really clicked and connected. I'm going to use that next time I do because it'll connect well with my students of the similar type mindset. There should always looking and pulling. We should always be learning and in turn making ourselves better. But I'd be a fool to sit here and say all this thing's been changed around me the last 20 years, but I'm still the same. And it's like, no, we're not. Even as a
Uh,
person, we're never the same person. And I forget
yeah,
who said the quote, but they said, a man steps into the river, the man is never the same, and it's never the same river, right? Because the river is
yeah,
constantly flowing. When you step in, it never changes, and because of your growth and everything you're going, you're never
yeah,
the same person when you step back into that river. So to me, it's just like people are out there doing it, and they're trying to come at other people
yeah,
for doing certain things. And it's like, okay, well, everyone has their own reason for doing it. Some people have their reason to teach body language and be all over YouTube is because they want the views and the likes, and then in some way it gives them that they're trying to pad their credibility of people that don't know any better.
yeah.
And I mean, and if you're good with that, fine. But I much rather have respect of my peers and those with
Hmm.
in the industry that can give credit to my work and my ability and my skill set. Nothing against viewers in there, but it's like, okay, you don't know what you don't know. In a way, it's unconscious incompetence in a lot of those aspects, right? We put in a Google search, like we were saying before. We want instant gratification. That's the first influencer that pops up. I read it, and most people, like I think you sent me Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Be a
Yeah,
skeptic. People
yeah.
aren't
Be a
skeptic enough.
skeptic.
Right? Remember, like years ago, when someone would say something, if it sounded too good to be true, we're like, "Man, that's some BS," and we did our
Yeah.
due diligence into it. It's like we've gotten away from that now, right? Now it's like we get all this stuff. We should be saying that's too good to be true when it
Yeah.
comes to like the behaviors and this, and
Yeah.
this. Like, that's not it. And then go out there and apply it. And I'll get off this soapbox because the other thing is like my biggest frustration with these same similar folks is as an instructor, as someone that's influencing on particular topics and things that you have experience in, you're projecting yourself as a subject matter expert in it. At least have the understanding that if you are getting those likes and those millions of views, understand the seriousness when people go out and take those tips you give them, especially if they aren't ethical or they're not proper, and you set someone up to fail or get them put into a situation where they can get hurt mentally or physically. That's liability. And that's one thing we talk about. Instructor liability is like, we should be fully vetting and confident in the things that we're putting out there, making sure things are out proper in the best way we can, because I don't want someone going out there and be like, oh man, and use something. No, that's BS. No, like what you're going to get from me is the best information I have. It's going to be science backed. It's going to be proven backed, experience backed, and I'm going to stand behind whatever it is. And I'm not going to teach people stuff that's just some goofy thing just because I want a view or a like.
I mean, I couldn't agree with any syllable of that any more than I already do. It seems to be that, and we are getting a little bit soapboxy, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it. Um, it seems to be that there is an unwillingness to admit like a even a perception of uncertainty, you know. And the simple fact of the matter is that because there are like what, I don't know, 8 billion people on the planet now, give or take, if you're claiming to be a master of human interaction, you are delusional, dishonest, or both.
Oh,
And like that's
and
it's one of those things. Yeah, just 2 secs, mate, because I know we could do this. It's one of those things that kind of it prevents growth. If
yes.
it is that you're going to try and attempt mastery, where you're saying to yourself, "I'm done, I'm out, no one can teach me anymore."
Well,
That's not true.
it goes along. It goes along with that other great quote, and that's why I was saying because you always trigger these things. When you bring up the whole Neil deGrasse with the crystal, I mean, just to sum that up, intellectually lazy.
Yeah,
We're just getting intellectually lazy. We got all these tech also at the fingertips. We just like, oh, okay, I take it at face value now, but my gut's telling me I should challenge it. Okay, then why? Denial is the same thing with situational awareness, right? And we touch these things. The denial is the first thing that comes up, and the first thing we have to address is the denial factor. No one's making popcorn at X amount of time. It's not fireworks going off. Those are gunshots. You need to get your brain out of it and get into understanding what is going on around you. And that's where we are. It's like, and for people that are looking up subjects that in turn want to make them to be more intellectual, right?
mm,
Because a lot of it is people want to be seen as intelligent. They want to be able to
mm,
do things. They're trying to elevate themselves. They're probably achievement driven and certain driven base, right? Because that's why they're looking into this, because they want to make the better first impression or get a better read on an environment or a person. But yet, when it comes to the training that they're seeking to get that, they're being intellectually lazy. So, in turn, are you really going to get that growth out of it personally and professionally that you're looking for?
No, no. Like there was I think it was a mass public shooting on a car park. I believe it was in Texas, but I don't know. I only saw the body cam footage, and I've seemed to have kind of connected that with Texas. I don't know if that's the case. I will need fact checking on that. But I watched the body cam footage from the guy that charged straight over there to try and get involved and help out. And he was talking to some lovely family, to, being nice to the kids, talking about, put your seatbelt on in the car, and make sure you listen to your parents, and pleasant, normal, lovely interactions that he was having. The second that was heard, the family were looking around going, and the police officer straight over. No messing. And that's the difference in terms of exposure when it comes to that. Not that you have to kind of prepare for gun battle in when you're taking the kids to the mall. No, but that kind of awareness in terms of possibility. When it is that you practice, or at least just look to apply the specifics of these methods just in your role as security guard, as police officer in this situation, without looking at the impact to you as a father, say in that scenario. I've no idea if he was a father. High likelihood that he is, but let's say, for example, that he is.
Yeah.
If it is that you only practice in the one role, then the second you put your uniform on, you put your belt on, you go out to go to work, you're in the zone. You're working. The second you go there as a father, those skills are diminished because you haven't got the immersion, you haven't got the experiential learning that it takes to be able to use these many different ways of thinking, or these many different ways of
Yeah.
taking in all of that information that exists. Because let's face it, with the human experience, there is a lot, right? There
Oh,
is a
there,
lot.
there's a ton, which is why I try to keep it to that validate, dismiss, clarify. All right, because that's the same thing when you're processing that. You should be
I'm gonna
validating
bring your
real
article
quick
up.
or dismissing immediately what you got. And in the situational aspect part, for law enforcement, it's slightly different because it's one of those we never. There's a high burnout rate and things like when it comes to law enforcement because for the most part, cops never switch off. That's been the
Mm.
most difficult thing with them. It's why there's a high divorce rate and things there, and people don't really understand because you can't, because even off duty you're having to certain things respond to, so you're always constantly even in and out, so you can never really enjoy your family time as much as you would like to, in
Of
those
course.
regards. um, but yeah, you prompted to write that situational awareness article there, and if you get a chance, Ben is going to put the link in here. There's going
I
to be
will.
some tips in there. It's for executive protection kind of thing, but if you look at it, you can apply it to any role that you're in, any industry, and the tips there are for everybody. You can tune them to yourself. It's really not that difficult to do. It's just really understanding those key roles and aspects that we're talking about, and knowing when you need to switch on. If you're unfamiliar, I suggest get familiar with Cooper's color code and understand the conditions. White, yellow, red, black, um, and you never want to be in condition white. Condition white really is only going to occur when you're at home and you're asleep. And you're kind of aware. But when you're leaving the house or anything else, you should always be in that slightly elevated state. You should be looking, especially if you're doing anything out in public, anything with the kids. There are just so many threats out there today. You just can't walk around with your face in your cell phone, just being oblivious, to the world. You need to be picking up on those things. I just challenge you to do something different every day. Just one little thing from there. Get some tips. Is pick up something. On your way to work. How many red lights do you pass? How many bus
Yeah.
stops are there? How many people typically are at a bus stop at those times of day when you go? Is there anything out of place or just in your neighborhood? My spouse and I, We know every car in our little community that's supposed to be there, not be there. And if it's not supposed to be there, one of us is telling the other, "Hey, by the way, did you see this on the other end of the cul-de-sac?" "Yep, I saw it. Yep, it's been there a couple of days. Not supposed to be here. No one's been around that car. Possibly an abandoned car." But it's like, it's we have that within each other, but we're both
Yeah.
military law enforcement type backgrounds. But it's just that awareness of our surroundings when we get out. It's like
Mm.
we anytime we leave, we're scanning and looking around. Anytime we go into a place,
Yeah.
you got five senses for a reason, and yet people will tell me that they never thought about taking a deep breath before they entered a place or a smell. Why wouldn't you? You might smell a gas leak. You might smell
Mm.
something burning.
Cigarette smoke. Yeah.
Something, yeah, something out of place. And why not walk around? I always walk around a restaurant first before I sit down. The family will go one way and sit with the hostess, and
Yeah.
I go the other way. I'm looking at exits, bathrooms, people, who stands out of place, who may be a problem, who may not be a problem, who's talking loud, who's had maybe one too many to drink and is
Yeah.
being way obnoxiously loud, that we're kind of paying attention because that guy may be a problem later.
Yeah.
How many people are consciously doing these things, and it doesn't really take a lot of bandwidth to do it. It's just a process that you should have to validate, dismiss, clarify what you got going in the environment, and you get an idea of what that environment looks like and feels like in that moment while you're there, which gives you a little bit, and then you can start seeing when things are added to or taken away from that based on you correctly, because you have now properly connected the neurons so that now they are wiring together the next time we go to that
That's the
restaurant. It might be
one.
your favorite restaurant. So the more we go to that restaurant, the more we pull in, the more we're adding to that, which is less we got to process later on, right? Because we just keep wiring it deeper and deeper.
That's the one. So just a couple of things while we kind of bring it in. I want one anecdotal piece of fun that I want to mention is when I went to dinner with Tom, situational awareness wizard. It was virtually an empty restaurant. There was a few groups towards the right hand side, but it was open. We had free reign, and so you could see kind of both of our processes in terms of where are we sitting, and then the waitress led us over to this table in the corner. It was a big table, but it was in the corner against the wall, and you could see us look at each other, and we both thought, who's having the back to the wall position? Tom let me have the back to the wall because I was carrying a bag with all of the podcast equipment in, and he sat the opposite side. So I was like, "Don't worry, Tom, you've still got the reflections from the mirror behind me." He was like, "Good point, good point." So you're absolutely right in terms of never switching off. But
Well,
one
yeah,
of the things. Go on, sorry.
it's funny you say that. The missus and I, we never sit next to each other at a restaurant. We always sit opposite diagonal because she's covering this area and I'm covering the other area. Like we're always there, we're talking. We have 360 degrees,
Exactly,
of
and
where we're at.
and that doesn't harm your fun, your engagement, your
No.
enjoyment of the night. There are just these processes that exist underneath everything
Yep.
that you're doing now. And that's one of those things in terms of the neurons firing and wiring. Should any of you be interested, it's a branch of neuroscience called neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Look it up to your heart's content. But one of the things that came out of the post of the blog article was, I believe he's a contact of Bob's. His name is Gopal. He. I will put the link in the comments description below, so everyone else can read about it as well. But he mentioned a particular paper on the unpredictability of human behavior and why it's so important to kind of be expanding your knowledge, yada yada, in terms of everything we've been
Which is why we
ranting
talk
about
about,
so
right? We
far,
can't put humans in a box. People
right?
try to all the time with anything, right? Put them in a box. They're going to behave this way and do this way with all these different corporate type models, right? And yeah, if you want to put it, the box is going to be all different shapes and sizes. We can't compare everybody the same. We have some
Agreed.
similarities. Ben and I get along on a lot of things, but there's going to be different things that motivate Ben that might motivate me differently or might not motivate me at all. And just certain ticks. I mean, when it comes to work ethic, not many people are going to match that similarly between you and I. It's we work all day. Here we are at night, and here you are early in the morning of the next day after working all day. I mean, the people listening to, but here we are because this is something that we're passionate about,
Damn right.
and you wouldn't think no different. you know, But I can't sit there and ever think that I could ever put Ben in a in this type of box and be like, okay, this is Ben. That's like, no, that's never going to fit. It's never going to work. Plus, guys, Ben was a magician. He can get out of the box. So it's just not gonna it's just not gonna work.
Escapology and the like. Put some handcuffs on me. Oh, we're getting into dodgy territory now. I apologize.
Right.
But yeah, the paper that was mentioned, I'll read to you what he put. Where are we? In his 1965 paper, An Essential Unpredictability in Human Behavior, Michael Scriven argued that it's possible to create deterministic systems whose behavior cannot be predicted, not even in principle. Roughly, his idea is that we can create a system that is either informed of or repeats the prediction that is made about what it itself will do, right? And
Mhm.
that's in essence. And yes, 1965, but that so far, as in terms of my reading about it since, has yet to be refuted.
Well, you figure it can't be refuted just because everyone's survival response is different. There's a reason why you have fight, flight, freeze. Right
Yeah.
there, it tells you got three different things that aren't predictable. Who's going to fight? Who's going to run? And who's going to freeze up? Well, that's going to be based off your experiences and what you have wired together and what you naturally have within your survival instinct. Some people never know their survival instinct until they're hit in that moment and the bad things happening, and then they find out really, really quick. I see it all the time teaching law enforcement recruits.
Mm.
We get them all the time defensive tactics week, and we're teaching them strikes and holds, and they got to fight us in a red man suit. And we teach them, hey, don't square up, don't do these particular things. And the first thing they do is forget everything they teach you, right? Everything we taught them, and they come
Naturally.
up straight up, square, face to face. And the first thing I do is I punch them right in that face mask, and right then and there, I see it. The pupils get dilated, right? The adrenaline comes in. And then the ones that have been in a fight or been experienced, guess what? They'll go to want to scrap and they still forget what they need to do because they need to be thinking from a law enforcement. But the other ones that never been, it's like you did a whole hard reset on your computer. It just freezes. Eyes get big and just everything just shuts down and they just stand there and it's just like hands there just go and you see it, all the time. But what you're doing in that is they're seeing that now, they're feeling it, but now they're able to now wire a neuron together and go, okay, this was a situation, this happened, I didn't like that, so what do I need to do now? I can't just stand there, so I need to either go away, which you can't do as a law enforcement officer, right? We can't just run away and go, oh, that guy hit me. We need to then revert to the training you've been taught, which is why there's a systematic thing and approach to it. And that's what people don't get is they don't understand where they're at in this mechanism. If you went by and you just hang out and all you do is sit in the basement and watch videos all day, well, yeah, you're not going to be able when you actually step outside that basement to the real world and someone confronts you, where you're not going to know how you're going to respond until you've been in some particular situations. And some of those things you can't just, some you can replicate depending on the training and stuff you take in one way or another. If you come take a martial arts class, some kind of class where you're going to get used to that and sparring and things. It's a controlled environment, and you'll be able to see and process and create those habits. Or, unfortunately, the worst way to find out is you're out in the street and someone, mugs you at knife point, or grabs you or throws you on the ground. It's just you're going to find out real quick what your natural instinct is going to be in that moment. You
Absolutely.
know,
Everyone's got a
so
plan till they get punched in the face, right?
Mike Tyson, that's right. But it's so true. And and that falls in line with everything, your situation, get out there and train it. You're not going to know what you're going to do, which is why you plan. I ask people all the time, if you're at your house when you're kids, they teach you at a young age to have a fire escape plan with your children at home. Okay, well, how many people make a plan when they go out and go to the restaurant? I mean, we did with our family. Hey, when the kid was young, okay, if something this were to happen, where we're gonna go, where's a safe spot to meet? Where's the rally point area? And it's here, and it would be more like, okay, something here to happen. My wife would take her child, exit one way if I stayed in and had to do what I had to do, and then we would meet at said point, when things are safe. But there was always a plan of this is why I knew where to exit or knew here, and there was a plan in that was talked about and discussed as you sit down and eat with dinner. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If it turns out that mom sees it first and mom has keys, then the role is reversed,
Yeah.
right? And you do what you have to do to ensure the safety and security of your loved ones. Oh no, couldn't have planned that one. Better if you tried. Oh
My Hulk hands. Oh dear.
no, I was hoping it was a magic trick. We're going back to that. Keep put them back together.
Gone.
Oh,
But that's kind of spun me for a loop now at the minute. But
you're good.
I mean, you'll have heard this quote being a coach for the same company, but the body cannot go to a place that the mind hasn't already been. Right, and with that in mind, folks, we may have been a bit passionate and inflamed at times this evening, but I hope, if nothing else, that the points that we spoke about came across, and you got some things to go and look at in terms of neuroplasticity, in terms of skill acquisition, in terms of games that you can play in order to trial this. One of the ones that I love to play is I Spy when I'm not in the room. So I'll get a text I Spy with my little eye, something beginning with whatever, and then I have to try and figure out what it is based on how I can remember what's in the room. A great game for your awareness as well.
Yep.
But yeah, use it. Use these skills at work. Use them at home. Use them on the way to work. Use them when you're going to the bathroom. Use them when you're listening to music. There isn't a single situation I can think of that these don't have a relevance towards. So stay tuned for more. Definitely check out the links in the comments, in the description below. And above all, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can stay tuned for more insights that we take great joy in sharing with you. It may seem like a silly and insignificant thing to do, or some statement that everybody says at the end of their podcasts or streams or videos, but it really does help. It really does help us to be able to bring you this kind of information on a more regular basis. So thank you for your time, thank you for your interest, and we shall see you again very soon. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. See you later.